I'm noticing that it's the top of the hour, and I'd like to really just honor us all for the folks that are here on time. Thank you very much. And I'd like to begin by first just letting people know that you have actually made it to the, this is the second group conference call, of the coaching and counseling group of the Deep Adaptation Forum. And I'm going to just mute everybody if I can find that. So I just am making it quiet so it's easy to hear here at the beginning. And we will have, many of us will be able to stay for the full length of the 90-minute call, and it's fine if you have other places to be. My request is try to leave at an opportune moment. We'll have a number of small group breakouts sessions during this call. So before one of those, or perhaps just after one of those, would be better than perhaps in the middle of one of those breakout sessions. For those who are really new to this whole idea, let me just introduce myself, and in a moment, I'll ask Matthew Painton, my fellow volunteer moderator for this coaching and counseling group of Jim Bendell's recently created Deep Adaptation Forum here on the internet for all to engage with as we may. Ours is just one of a number of subgroups in the Deep Adaptation Forum. There, on last count, gosh, I'm sorry, I've forgotten. I think approximately 150 members of the coaching and counseling subgroup here. You know, this is a completely optional call, so some number of us will show up live, and ours is a bit different than some other subgroups. We will record our calls and post them for folks to look at later. So if you have to leave today early, then you can catch up by watching the recording later. I'm very interested personally in shifting gears a number of times consciously during this call, because my sense is that those of us who are engaged with in the fields of coaching or counseling, we have some amount of ability of self-regulation, assisting others with their self-regulation. We know what it is to be in a dysregulated state. We know what it is to just be scrambled from coming from whatever was outside the door that you just came through to sit and be in this call. And I'd like us all to bring those skills best we can to this conversation, to bring ourselves to more and more presence as this call goes on. There are a number of new people here, people who were not here at the first call a couple of months ago, people who are new to this entire thing, this whole idea of an online forum, and certainly the Deep Adaptation Forum itself. So Matthew, would you introduce yourself so that people know your face and voice?
Hello there. I'm Matthew. I'm in the UK and I live in Bulgaria. I guess I wanted to say I'm coming to this conversation as a life coach, working as a life coach, but I think anyone who's here, whether you're in a professional capacity or not, if you're interested in the topic, then it's the right place for you to be here, because we're all, as we become collapse aware, we're all have these conversations, and to know how to hold these conversations with our friends, family. So it matters not if this is a professional interest or just because you're here, just because you're interested. We all, as Dean says, this is the most important conversation, and we all need to know how to hold it better. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay. We've Matthew and I have just been looking at how it would be best to progress through this call today to be of most value. And well, some of our ideas are, I think, pretty strong and good, and actually, come from some amount of experience that Matthew or I brought to this conversation, and others were experimenting. And so I hope you'll bear with us in that experimentation. So we're going to break up now into small groups. And before we do that, for those who are new here, and actually for all of us, this call is meant to be an exploration together. This forum and this small group of coaching and counseling, this call, all of it is really intended to be an exploration. And I think it's safe to say that there are no experts on what is called for in these extraordinary times with regard to coaching and counseling, or just about any other aspect of life, given what we're facing. So if you have any nervousness about saying the right thing, or gosh, you might not be an experienced life coach, or you might not be a credentialed counselor, you might just be curious and wonder, I don't even know how to answer the questions that might come, and so on. A number of people have expressed some discomfort. I would invite you to know that none of us knows what the right answers are here. We live in the most extraordinary time in human history, and this is a rare opportunity to be in a safe, non-argumentative environment to be able to support one another in what's come to be called deep adaptation. Could be called the inner practices, or the inner preparation or expansion of capacities to be present in the face of extraordinary circumstances. So hopefully that will let you relax a little bit as you settle into your small groups. We will have a very particular prompt that we'll be offering you for each of these brief breakout sessions that we're going to do today. I'd like to ask that each small group that you're in, if you would set up a timekeeper, and I'll be telling you how much time each of you have, and ask that you just keep that time as close as you can, because then when that amount of time is up, everyone will be redirected back to the whole group space. Before I offer the prompt and get us into our first round of sharing, is there anyone with a pressing question, a concern, anything that really needs to be said before we get the ball rolling in a different direction? Okay, very good. So the first question that you're going to be in groups of 4. Make that 3. You'll be in groups of 3. And I'd like to ask you to take 2 minutes each to answer or to complete the sentence, the incomplete sentence of the deep adaptation skills that I see are needed in our world are ... And what I'd like to ask you to do is, when you hear the words "in our world," I'd like you to go to the level of engagement and the level at which your attention is most comfortable on a daily basis. Let me give you an example. I go right to the global level. I can go right to global conversations. I can talk international politics. I easily go to that level. It's even easier for me to go to national level politics and so on, and issues. I have a number of people in my family and circles of friends that level of conversation almost turns their stomach. They do their best to avoid that level of engagement with the world and that level of their attention in the world. And so when I ask them to go to their comfortable level of engagement or attention in the world, they might go to our neighborhood or our city, our little region here in Southern Oregon. And there are a number of friends in my circle that where the largest scale they are comfortable going to on a daily basis is their own family and work and neighborhood. That's as big as it gets for them comfortably. I hope that's communicating. Could you give me a thumbs up if you understand? I'm asking you to determine your own scale. Great, thank you. And so that's the first thing you'll do is you'll introduce yourself to your other two compadres, and you'll tell them perhaps where you're from, a little bit about yourself, just a few seconds, the briefest of introductions, and then please start to respond to the question, the deep adaptation skills that I see are needed in our world are, and your timekeeper will let you know when your 2 minutes are up, and the next person will go. Any questions? All right, I love the kind of engaged, serious faces going on. Thank you. We'll just give me a moment to get us into those, into your breakout rooms. And as soon as you're all together, your timekeeper will start the time.
Hey, Dean.
Hi, everybody. I hope you don't mind me butting in, but I just was alone there, so I just would love to be.
Great.
So excuse me for interrupting. Please go.
Yeah, I was just saying nervous system regulation skills is near the top of my list of needed skills in the communities that I'm in, and personally, that has served me a lot in the process of reckoning. Well, you know, what also comes to mind is different ways of knowing, different ways of perceiving in the world, being able to have a different kind of relationship with trees, with my own bodily sensations, and sort of, this is on the level of phenomenology, how we know what we know. And so I think about, yeah, just developing the capacity to relate differently to different types of information, other than what most people have been conditioned to accept as, you know, only kind of information to accept is cognitive, and it's debatable, and it's not intuitive. And so building that intuitive feeling capacity, that relational capacity to the non-human world, and also to our own inner sensations, seems like a vital part of this process. That's
Cool.
what I have for now.
Jay, you want to have a go?
Sure. So I'm now doing 2 minutes each since we got 4. So let's see, I'm a psychotherapist in private practice in the Bay Area in California. And I actually do less individual therapy now and more teaching internal family systems therapy and running groups based on that. So what skills do we need? Well, you know, I've done a lot of thinking and putting out recently of a proposal for a social movement to transform society. So in terms of the skills that I think we need the skills of coming together in a sustained way to deal with this planetary crisis. So, and there's an enormous, I mean, if you want to look at the individual level, there's an enormous number of skills that are needed: networking skills, being able to reach out to others, to connect. Of course, skills of being able to deal with the feelings that come up for us when we face the kind of crisis the world is in. It's almost too many. I can't even think. There's like so much that's needed. Why don't I just stop there? Oh, that's my time anyway. Okay.
Okay, let it go. I'm a sustainability consultant by profession. I've spent the last 33 years trying to make a difference, and I realize I haven't. I spent most. I lost my audio. Can you hear me, guys?
Well, you froze for a moment there, but I can hear you now.
It's okay. It's just my audio dropped out momentarily. Yeah, I'm an architect and a sustainability consultant, so I've been trying to make a difference, but see that it hasn't and won't. But I'm privileged to be married to a therapeutic counselor. So I've developed some kind of understanding, or the beginnings of an understanding of what people are going to have to face and how they're going to have to go about confronting the change that's going to come upon us. Personally, I think we're too far gone. I don't think our species is going to last much longer. We're seeing many others actually disappear around us. So I think our task, my task, is to help us to come to terms with the death of pretty much everything that we see around us, and probably our own deaths too. And we're going to need to do that on a big scale. This is more than just person-centered. This is entire species stuff. How about you, Dean?
Well, I appreciate what each of you have said. There we go.
Sorry about that.
All right. I think my quicker answer would be that out of writing a book in the past few years, and now with another one on the way, and a whole body of work about exactly this, I keep trying to make it as simple as I possibly can, because when I don't, my head explodes. It's just so much to try and hold. And the simplest level I've been able to generate is in answering what got us here. The answer keeps coming back, some form or another of disconnection. We've disconnected from the primary sources of meaning in human life: deeper self, other people, and Earth. And the practices that I see are essential, are practices that reconnect us with the web of life. And that's all I know at that level of that I can hold. That's simple. So all of my practices and really all of my body of work lands there in that simple space. And I don't mean to say simple like, oh, it's so easy. It's just these 3 life hacks. I'm just saying that's the simple, basic way I know to hold it so that my head doesn't explode, and so that I have some chance of touching what I call grace. I certainly haven't coined the phrase, but you know, it's just, that's the way I describe the inner energy source that appears to be available whenever I do reconnect. So thank you. It looks like about half of us are back. A few more. Right.
Was there an option to reject the return? It seemed like you just went ahead and made that happen for us. You know?
I love the question, though. Thank you. All right, welcome back. And I think we might have a person who has arrived since we started, but
Yeah, hi. I just joined. I apologize for my tardiness.
Hi, who are you?
My name is Moshe Giventhal. I'm a rabbi in Metro Detroit, Michigan, U.S.
Moshe, welcome.
Thanks. Could you guys catch me up a little bit on what I missed?
Yeah.
While we wait for folks?
I'd be more than happy to. You've got a couple of people on the chat here that you can't see that are welcoming you.
Hi, everyone.
So, Moshe,
thank you.
Well, this is the second Zoom call that we've had in the coaching and counseling subgroup of Jem Bendell's recently created Deep Adaptation Forum. And excuse me, we the very first one we had a couple of months ago was a very brief chance for us all, about 15 people on the call to say hello, get to know one another, and just say, my gosh, what the heck are we doing in this brand new thing? That we're about half a centimeter further down the timeline from there. In which we're a new bunch of people, mostly, a few familiar faces. And what there are two of us that are volunteer moderators in this coaching and counseling subgroup. There's Matthew Painton and myself. And put together this call with a bit of a theme. And the theme is, how must we transform the fields of coaching and counseling, and for that matter, ourselves, in these extraordinarily challenging times. And so one way we can talk about the personal work, the inner work that a person might do to prepare themselves, to expand their capacity to be present in the face of large-scale stressors, could be called deep adaptation, which many of the folks on the call are very familiar with the work of Jem Bendell.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work and paper in the Facebook forum. So
great.
Familiar would be a decent word. Not deeply knowledgeable, but familiar. And I come to this also as a trained facilitator in Joanna Macy's The Work That Reconnects.
Right.
I don't know if that's familiar to anyone on the call, but that's kind of work that's sort of been trying to do this for the last few decades.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And yes, the Work That Reconnects is a vitally important piece of the context of this kind of facilitation and this kind of work. Joanna and Molly Young-Brown and the many that have come after them and since them, my hat's off to that gorgeous piece of work, and may it continue to grow in some way. And Moshe, how we started this call, Matthew and I decided to be just a little bit mischievous. And how we're doing that is we started this call out in pretty much what I would say is a business as usual human operating system way. It's here's this kind of pudgy old white guy who's laying out this is how the call is going to go, and he's asking the questions and he's laying out the context. That's me primarily, and Matthew has chimed in as well. And this is how 10 jillion calls and meetings have gone through the history of business as usual, as we all know. What we then did was break as soon as possible into the first of the small group breakouts. And we did that with as little setup as possible, but knowing that there's some amount of shared reality, some amount of context that we might cobble together. You know, when we all got ourselves into this forum and into this small group and then further into this call, there's a certain amount of shared reality that we can assume, perhaps. And what Matthew and I were wanting to bring to this call in particular was how might we need to transform ourselves in these extraordinary times? And this includes how we participate in just this kind of conversation. It includes the quality of our listening. It includes the quality of our participation. And it includes the quality of presence that we bring to our engagement with this entire topic, with this entire conversation of deep adaptation, of doing deeply engaging personal work in the face of what is arguably the most important and trauma-related conversation that human beings have ever had to engage. So
thank you for welcoming me in. I'm glad to be here, joining you in presence and listening.
All right, very good. So what we're intending to do now is shift gears, and I'd like to shift those gears in a particular way and offer a bit of something that might facilitate or help us talk about what we want to talk about. But first, when I look at this work of deep adaptation and I look at what the current situation is in this world and what got us here, I was just speaking in the small group I was in about how I've answered the question, what got us into this predicament? Because that's how I personally have landed, is that we are actually in a predicament in addition to numerous global scale vexing problems and challenges. That what we're actually encountering is that we're facing the cost of our collective and individual disconnection. We've disconnected from our deeper selves, from each other, and from Earth. You may have a different way of seeing this. You may not use the word predicament, but I'd like to ask you to just allow yourself to be conversant with these particular pieces that I'm laying out, and as if it's comfortable for you to do so, or certainly introduce your own when you're talking in your small groups. And as what I'm doing right now is just allowing myself to, sometimes I call it taking the elevator down from that heady place that I was just describing, that we started this call with. That I was doing the largest portion of the talking. It's another white male. I was speaking in a linear, kind of a monotone. I was doing what has been done so many times in so many meetings in the business as usual culture. And when I allow my attention and my intent to lower down literally in my body and in my field, I'm gonna just mute us here. When I lower my attention and lower my intent down into other organs of perception besides my eyes and my body and my head, my eyes and my brain and my head, and I lower it down, and I look at virtually the same picture or the same question. First, what is it that we're actually seeing in our world? And there's a slower pace that I start to take on. and there's a feeling, a registering of emotions or feelings in my system. And I'm also anchoring, doing a bit of self-regulation, anchoring myself through experience of being able to touch, contact the desk in front of me, the coolness of the desk, the coolness of the air in the studio I'm in. And the words that start to come up for me about what we're facing is an unraveling. And of course, Jem Bendell has made it a very pointed emphasis in his work to talk about the current and imminent collapse of human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. And when I'm in that state, when I'm allowing myself to open to a deeper level of feeling at that different pace, I notice that there's a wave of grief that I have. And especially when I use the word unraveling, there is so much sadness, and there's also a wave that occurs for me around anger, really bordering on rage, that it doesn't take much for me to feel that as well. So I'm sharing with you that descent and my version of the waves, or the, what emerges when I allow myself to go to those deeper levels of experience. And I would invite you to do the same thing in whatever your particular practices are. I think, Matthew, with your permission, what I'd like to ask you to do is, would you speak a little bit about the paper that you recently posted on the forum, and what your intentions were with that, what your emphases were?
I was speaking to transcendence, meaning that which is bigger than ourselves, than our personal self. And our world that is unraveling has corralled very personal, individualistic, separated sense of self. That's where we operate from. We're all corralled into that notion of self. There are other perspectives, other ways.
Matthew, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Great. So we're corralled into a very individualistic notion of self. And as our world unravels, there's an internal that can happen that mirrors the external collapse. As our notion of self really also unravels. Everything we're attached to, everything we own, the life we thought we were going to have, our pension schemes, the lives we thought our children were going to have, the nature that we enjoy, starts to fall away. And there's a grief process to that. But there's also an invitation to transcendence. That which is bigger than ourselves, processes, geological processes, universal processes. And as coaches, or as people that are holding conversations with each other, how do we talk about transcendence and process? And there is a lot of comfort in the transcendent. It's not just a passive meditational state, it can be very active. So I wrote a paper that was trying to stimulate conversation about how we talk about transcendence, and how we become familiar with a scale of self beyond our individualistic, and not just in trauma, not just in the world unraveling, but in processes that are not ending. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And for those who will revisit this conversation with the recording when it's posted, in the show notes of that particular posting of that video, I'll link to Matthew's writing about that he's been talking about. So the next question for the next small group breakout is how the transformation of coaching and counseling in these times will include, and then you'll continue to complete that sentence in your sharing time. So these times and this collapse or unraveling appears to be demanding something very different from the business as usual world that in which we find ourselves facing human-caused collapse. But that's all we've ever known. That's how coaching and counseling came about, was in that world. And everything we know within and around that, that's how it came about. We appear to have a foot in two worlds, one in that collapsing world and one in a world that has not been articulated yet, one that hasn't even been well imagined yet. And what we're asking you to do is to imagine what is the transition, what are the transformations that will be required in these service-oriented fields of holding space for other people. So the transformations that I see will be needed in coaching and counseling are, so there's your prompt. And if we could go with, we will go with groups of 3 this time. And if each person takes 3 minutes, and of course, setting yourself up with a timekeeper. And is there a question? Is there anything before we break up?
Lisa here.
Yes.
Wondering if maybe we did quite well with 2 minutes each in the 4 of us in our last group, and then we had time to sort of exchange a little bit instead of just 4 monologues. How about that with the 3? Could we do maybe 2 minutes each and then have a little time amongst ourselves to reflect?
I love that idea. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we're still doing 6. And so we'll do, is 2 minutes sufficient at the end of your 3-person sharing for the kind of talking that you want to do?
I'm good with that. I just see what others are thinking.
All righty. Well, let's do that. We're going to do it 8 minutes total. And you're going to do 2 minutes each for your individual sharing. And I'm going to get you into breakout rooms.
I was just saying, I think there's some really practical things that coaching can do that links to, you know, from the commissioning of coaching to the way it's contracted to, you know, evaluating, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole setup around it, I think, could be much more cognizant of the change in the context. And we can just be much more explicit and kind of I don't know how coaching tends to be set up in your context, whether it's just purely individual or whether there's a kind of organizational sponsor. But I think that as coaches, we can be setting out our position a lot more clearly right from the start, and saying, you know, this is where we're coming from, this is what we stand for, you know. And I think that's the challenge and the risk sometimes, you know, that's the hurdle that people feel they've got to step over. But I think it's more honest, and I see a lot of times when I am able to just kind of say, well, you know, these are my values as a coach. Yes, I have values and I have beliefs. And people tend to kind of respect that. So I don't know what other people have experienced there, but I do feel like there's some stuff. Let's not ignore the simple transactional stuff as well. I'm done for now. If anybody wants to go next.
So I view the human ecology as part of the whole ecology, part of the whole biosphere. And so just regenerating that as just part of, say, the neural ecology of the planet. And in particular, regenerating, I see this also not just as a ecological crisis, but deep adaptation also as having within it embedded an evolutionary crisis that has to do with consciousness. And so the evolution, you know, any ecosystem is always evolving and vice versa. So I view it as part of the same thing. And I work with people with their it boils down to intimacy, a concept I call regenerative intimacy. And so this may seem abstract on various scales, but it comes down to real nitty-gritty, direct and immediate interactions with human beings. And what I try to avoid, both in myself, in working on myself, and with the people that I work with, whether in everyday life or in my practice, is to liberate myself from a focus on individuals, like individual billiard balls pinging across each other on a billiard table, to the relationality of it. And bringing, this is very challenging especially for some people, bringing greater somatic awareness to the circulating energies between people of thought, sensation, emotion, and dealing with all of the stuff that comes up, whether it's existential crisis, grief, anxiety, mythopoetic issues, all of that occurs in regenerating the circulating energies in a person's interpersonal matrix, bringing that back to life, and dealing with the traumas and what have you that arise. If that makes sense.
Sure. Just to explain, Dean, I was in another group and I got suddenly bumped into this group, and so I'm still going, oh, what are we doing? So I'm Manisar. Well, one of the, I think a lot about transferable skills, and I was just jotting some notes about the things I already do, the things I've spent a lifetime learning, how they can be transferred and applied in a useful, relevant way for climate unraveling and for communities facing that. And I'm also thinking of, so that's true for me, and everybody's a coach or a counselor. And also, I'm thinking of it, it's kind of like taking those skills and abilities that we already have, and it's like they've been put inside a kiln, for people. It's kind of like what will quicken and what will be tough and what will be really resilient. So kind of examining that, I think that's just an organic thing that will happen, but I also think that we can be moving that along, thinking about that. And then there's an organization called Capacitar that I trained with a few years ago. And what they do is they gather trauma healing techniques that are ancient and modern, and their criteria for gathering those techniques is they can be learned by a 5-year-old. And if you forget how to do them, you can't possibly harm anybody by doing them wrong. And so they gather those skills and they go to communities that have experienced war or like after Hurricane Katrina, and they teach people those skills. So I'm thinking for transformations needed that a lot more of some of these sophisticated neuroscience and trauma healing, et cetera, skills we have to translate them into layperson's language more and more, to make them more accessible, to boil down what we can into things that we can teach people quickly, so that communities can figure out, okay, well, I like these practices, but I don't like these ones. So I'm kind of looking to Capacitar as a model as I'm thinking about this. How can we, and also, I don't know how much time I have left, but I have 2 more things to say. I think that what we're doing right now, community building amongst counselors and coaches, is really important. Building community and teaching stuff together and working together and creating things together is really important. And then from there, building community and doing community level work, at least sometimes group work, at least sometimes to transfer these accessible trauma healing skills on. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Dean, are you with us? Are you sitting in, or are you part of our group?
Well, I am, in as much as it's way too lonely to just sit there alone while you all are talking. And I appreciate very much, you allowing me to do that. I don't think there's like a minute left on my timeline that I think we have left for this entire thing. I would appreciate it if you would just continue to now allow yourselves to mush up the conversation like was asked for, and I'm loving hearing what I'm hearing. Thank you so much for letting me sit in.
Great. I mean, I'm hearing something really interesting from the 3 of us, which is that this, the approaches come at a whole set of different levels. So like we've got the kind of just basic, the premise for coaching, the expectations of what it's going to be about, the way that we're going to operate. So working with embodiment and that kind of interbeing space that I think you were really touching into, Richard. And then Vanessa, what is the skill set that we want to both apply and also help, to cascade in others that is enabling of kind of that further ripple effect, and let's not make it too complicated for people so that anybody can just connect with this. That feels really powerful.
Yeah,
I recommend the Zimbabwean Friendship Bench training. Trains grandmothers to provide very effective, apparently, services for people who are troubled on a local park bench.
Yeah.
I like the name.
Friendship Bench.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired by what I've heard from each of you. It's so much in line with, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Lisa Van Susteren. She's a mental health advisor in the US. And she put out a report about 5-6 years ago now that was basically said, facing climate change and other large-scale stressors around the world, in terms of the USA, she and her partner in the study found estimated that we would be seeing 200 million Americans experiencing some sort of chronic or acute mental health difficulty. And in my subsequent conversations with her, every time she has said, oh boy, did we underestimate that number. That's 200 million out of 350-ish. I think we are at some point now. So to hear things like easy to take to scale, easy to integrate in a conversational way in minutes, and you can't mess somebody up. You can't do it wrong. I just love these criteria. That's exactly the track that I'm seeing. Anything more complicated than that, and my head explodes that, you know, we just don't have time to become masters or PhD counselors. There's just not the space for it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I'm afraid we've gone over our time. I'm gonna get myself out of here and give us all the return cue.
Sure.
Continue talking as long as you can.
Vanessa, you were going to say something?
I just think it's really
business as usual. That's going to be phenomenal.
Hey, Dean, we're the keeners. We kicked ourselves out and got back before time.
You are such good children. Oh my gosh.
I know,
Gold star for every one of you.
Yeah.
We even had time to debate coming back.
So I'm so glad you lost the debate that you're actually back here, because I know, William, you would have had yourselves going out for lunch.
It was all wonderful, I assure you.
Good, good. So, Matthew, while we have just a moment, what I'm thinking about is asking you to shift us in whatever you'd like to introduce that paragraph and take it to the personal transformation level for the last round. And then, actually, we've got a half an hour.
Can you say that one more time? What's happening in the next half an hour?
Oh, I'm just babbling as I'm trying to speak with Matthew while you all were coming back, and I didn't think anyone would be listening because I was using my invisibility.
Okay, never mind that.
So I have no sense to be made of that. Sorry to say. I'm actually drawn to both you reading that and also a completely different wingnut direction for the last sharing that I guess I'm just going to have to ask you to trust me on, if that's okay, because we don't really have a private way to, talk off to the side.
I trust you, Dean.
Couldn't hear you.
I trust you.
Okay. Do we have everybody back? Let's see. What do we got here? All right. Well, welcome back. And actually, I would really appreciate if we could just take a few moments to share in the whole group. Unfortunately, we don't have nearly the space to have everyone share something. But I would like to ask if there was some particular way in these past couple of breakout sessions, if there's something you've learned or something that's particularly surprised you, if you would be willing to briefly share that with us, you could go ahead and unmute yourself and begin. And if there's two people at the same time, we'll just work it out. And I would also open up this particular round of possible sharing to include, is there a way in which you are moved by being in the presence of kindred spirits in this conversation? And if so, is there something you'd like to share about that?
I just want to share something that that's been a kind of ongoing thought for me that today seems to have kind of reinforced, which is that coaching, counseling, therapy is kind of adaptogenic in its approach, that it is about tuning into what needs balancing and how to balance that, which goes beyond a narrow professional code of conduct. And I think what's happened, certainly in the coaching world, is that it has become narrowly tethered to certain criteria, certain standards that people feel very scared to move away from. And I think that what we're exploring here is the need for our own use of self as a practitioner, so self as instrument, to be really tuned into a kind of a Gaia sense of what needs to happen here, and to intuit the freedom to move into the space that's needed. And I think that we have a lot to learn from each other about the different ways that we're doing this. So I personally really value the diversity of perspectives on this call, because it just helps to keep me feeling kind of fresh and on point and excited and ready for the next conversation. So I just want to offer that.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'd like to go a half step beyond that. I think that's a wonderful point. And I'd like to offer that when we talk about positioning ourselves in the face of the collapse of business as usual, we're really still talking about this as a livelihood or a calling, a covenant. Because really, if we believe that business as usual is to be gone in the not too distant future, then we're putting our whole selves into this, and without an expectation that we're going to get paid for it. That this is a skill we bring to the community. And it's one of the reasons why I tend to focus a little bit more on the applied skills, if you will, rather than the, and again, not one to the exclusion of the other, because if this isn't a livelihood anymore, if this isn't something that we depend on because business as usual is going to continue, then we better have some very practical skills to bring into that community conversation. And perhaps even in addition to the way that we treat others, want others to treat us, and etc. My thought.
Beautiful. Thank you, William.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, William. I've spent a lot of time myself thinking about, is the real source of emotional resilience in the face of uncertainty the fact that I know how to forage for wild plants? Because I'm not going to go hungry as long as there's sun and rain, and the channel that those questions have come to my mind have been questioning my ability to contribute in the first place. Is coaching and counseling a contribution that in the face of catastrophic level collapse, Jem says inevitable collapse, probable catastrophe, possible extinction, right? That's sort of the language. My thought is if it gets to the catastrophic, and that probability that I'm certainly accepting as deeply probable, will my contribution have merit at that time, or does it only have merit now in preparing people for the emotional resilience required to be present then to what's happening? And as Moishe said during our breakout, which was what I was going to say before what you said, William, is to be present now to the joy that comes, this part's my language, from the tenderness and the cherishing of nature and of community now, And as Moshe said, using that as an access, that joy as an access to begin re-exploring, you know, the softness of a flower petal, et cetera, et cetera. And so I feel useful now. And I notice that part of what I'm navigating is a sense of not feeling that I will be useful once things are catastrophic. I will have either done my work to help prepare as many people as possible or not.
Yeah, Brennan, thank you. Matthew, I'm wondering if you would share with us the reading of that one paragraph from your essay.
Sure. By way of introduction, about 3 years ago now, my father died, and his health went. He had breathing problems, lots of his faculties were going, and he didn't suffer. And it was very clear that even as things were getting worse for him, he wasn't suffering. He still had a twinkle in his eye, a laugh with the nurses. And I thought about that a lot and realized he wasn't suffering because he was aligned with what is. He wasn't thinking that things should be otherwise. So it was just uncomfortable, painful at times, undignified at times, but he wasn't really suffering. So this paragraph speaks to that. Suffering occurs when we separate ourselves from what is, when we hold what is shouldn't be happening. We fear to accept what is in the hope that by not accepting it, we can exercise control over how it will unfold. But acceptance is not necessarily passive. Alignment with what is can give us far greater power to affect things. This is an age-old history. What follows in the essay are some conceptual notions which point towards a transcendent understanding that may be of use in accepting collapse and so reduce suffering, and the possibility of unleashing the power of greater alignment with what is. So as we think about catastrophic effect, collapse, and how we're suffering in anticipation of that, the question is, how do we align with what is, and where are we misaligned and struggling against it, so suffering?
Matthew, thank you. And again, that whole essay, the link to it will be in the show notes in the recording when it's posted in a day or two. The last breakout that I'd like to ask us to take on is one, again, I believe we're going to be able to be mostly in groups of 3. And thank you so much for your patience, and that Zoom has a mind of its own today. It, in at least a couple of times now, has not really wanted me to put you into groups of 3, and I don't know why. In any case, this next one, there are 3 parts to the prompt. First, if you have a sense of what a number of people have brought up so far in the sharing today, your calling in these times, if you already have a sense of that for yourself that you could share easily, start by introducing your calling as you see it, as you experience it, as it has emerged for you in these times. Should just be a sentence or 2. Then the second part of it would be your skills, or some people call it the gold, the special attributes of your presence in the world that you bring. And this is not a time to be shy. In my family, it was not okay to brag about oneself. So I would ask if you have that kind of thing going on to set it aside. If it's of any help at all, you might try this part in third person to introduce your skills and abilities and benefits that you bring to life as you describe them about someone else. Of course, with using your name. And the third and final piece of this prompt is my growing edge, or the areas that call for my learning, growing, and expansion are. So again, you're calling if you already know it, and it's fine if you don't, just skip over it. The second one, my skills, my gold. The third is my growing edge, the things that I know I need to bring forth in order to bring that calling into the world. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so we'll go into groups of 3 as quickly as I can, and I may move a couple of people again if I have a group of 5 or some weird Zoom clump. And we will see each other in approximately 10 minutes. So I would recommend 3 minutes each with a little bit of conversation time after, and I will probably nudge into a little bit longer time, truth be told. So I'll get us going into groups of 3. And it looks like we have someone on the phone. Who's with us?
Hi, this is Moshe.
Hey, Moshe. Great. You're with Dean and Jay Early.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hi.
Would either of you like to begin?
I could. So my calling at this point is to be part of starting a social movement, or rather catalyzing the existing social movement for what's been called the Great Turning, or the real transfer, a pretty complete whole system transformation of society. And the skills that I bring to that, unfortunately, are not all that are needed for a social movement, but excuse me. The 2 big skills that I bring is that I am kind of a visionary. I can really see the big picture, and the other is that I'm a good group leader, and work well with groups, as, you know, especially personal growth therapy groups, that kind of thing. And so part of the vision I have for this organization and this movement is, well, the organization that would be kind of built on small groups where people really doing the kind of processing we're talking about here, but also moving toward action. And what was the third question, team?
I'm sorry, I was muted. It's your growing edge, the things you need to work on to be more effective in bringing forth that calling.
Well, one of the things I've really noticed in the initial work I've done on this is that I have to be able to work with a wide variety of people. There's a part of me that can get judgmental pretty easily, and I have to really, I've been working on setting that part aside and just accepting, you know, instead of judging the people because they're not exactly the way I want them to be, to accept people as they are and learn to work with them. So I think that's
Great.
My growing edge.
Thank you, Jay. Moshe, are you willing to go next?
Yeah. Still collecting my thoughts. So my role, so I sit at I sit, live, work, try to at intersection of several different communities, which I think positions me to help those different communities understand how understand and learn from each other in regard to these issues. and to hold space for folks processing the realities of these things emotionally. I think we're going to need a whole lot more of that. As a skill, I bring lots of experience of coping and not coping with my own emotional pain well, as well as hopefully helping others cope with theirs well, one-on-one and in groups, and as was shared previously, also a desire and an ability to and an interest to see things on much bigger time scales, and have that kind of vision. In terms of growing edge, I would say two things. One is to step up in leadership much more often. And also, and within that, to have a much more worked out sense of how I hold what people are sharing, and specifically to point out that we need to address these things in different ways depending on where people are in the spectrum of their understanding and acceptance of the crisis. Because I tend to want to go sort of for the jugular of, what today we're calling deep adaptation. That's a, civilizational collapse danger. But when people are not, 10 degrees removed from that reality, then talking about it doesn't really help. They just go and, go into numbness. And I have some, and I've worked on acceptance of that, and I need to titrate how I share and how I hold space, but I don't have a clear model worked out inside of me of like a person is at stage X, then like respond, with Y and Z and so on and so forth. And I want to work those things out inside of myself much more clearly, and I think then I can be much more effective.
Beautiful, very clear. Thank you so much.
How about you?
Yeah, I would say that my calling is that is really to bring as much grace and beauty and love as I can to this world through the various gifts that I have. And my skills, I'm a strong facilitator. I am a deeply loving friend and fellow human being to others. I have a substantial capacity to be with people, no matter where they are on a spectrum, about what's going on in the world. In other words, full-blown deniers and so on. I seem to have some decent amount of capacity to be with them in a way that is not me judging them or making them wrong or myself right and so on. I have a great appreciation for beauty and for right relationship. And I guess if I shift to what my growing edge is I live in a very white valley in Southern Oregon, and I don't have nearly enough exposure to marginalized populations or people of color or people who are clearly already experiencing collapse. I have a tremendous amount of privilege that I am insulated by, and I'm aware of it to, I think, a fairly decent degree, but I have so much more to learn and to open to, and that can be difficult when I'm not around folks much who represent those populations I was just talking about. And I want it. I want that. I also need to keep deepening my practice of letting go. It's taken everything I had to face the depth of what it is that I believe we're being asked to let go of, which is literally everything. And
Yeah.
and so I'm challenged by that, and I'm so blessed to have had an experience of grace in my life, and prolonged exposures and immersions in grace that I can now call on at will. And I think without that particular skill, I would not be alive now. I think is the truth of it. So that's probably enough. We're butting right up against the end of the timing. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go read the news and get us back together.
Thank you, guys.
It gives us a 60-second heads up, you know?
Yeah.
And then about 45 seconds later, oh, you're just messing with me, aren't you?
Just when you thought there was going to be more time.
You're testing my ability to be resilient.
Or to self-regulate in the face of the abyss.
That's right. Wait a minute. I was told the collapse is going to happen on Thursday. It's only Wednesday.
Who do you call to complain?
Exactly. I'm sorry that it cut you off, Anasar. Or at least it cut you off for me. It pulled me out again. So I didn't get to hear the end of yours.
And Vanessar, you're muted if you wanted to say something. Yeah. Okay. I believe we have everybody back. We are coming up very close to the end of our time together. This is just one of what will be a series of this type of get-together. You are welcome to come up with ideas that you would like to explore and to host this kind of meeting. It's not just for Matthew and me to do this. If you would like to do that, please just contact me. I believe that my email is all over the invitations that you followed to get here. So please contact me, Dean Walker, anytime within the forum if you'd like help in how to do that. It would be a pleasure to help you host your first of this kind of gathering, if that's something of interest for you. Curious, I'm going to just mute everybody. Curious if we have a couple of shares. I'm particularly interested in anyone who has noticed more of a presence of your own heart, your own full depth of experience in answering these last questions. Is there any chance we could ask you to share for a few moments with us anything that you have from that place?
Somebody just posted a question about whether the breakout groups were recorded.
Sorry?
Somebody asked a question about whether the breakout groups are recorded.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yes. The only breakout group that would be recorded in any of those sessions were the ones that I was in. So those are the ones that will be representative when a person looks at the recording of the call. If that's a problem for anyone, if that's a problem in terms of privacy and so on, please let me know either now or through email that you would rather not have that recording shown, and I can cut it. So just let me know. And again, this is an invitation in the last couple of moments here. Is there anyone who would like to share? My jargon for it is from a newly broken open heart from which you've been sharing. Is there anything you would like to offer out to the group at large?
I just want to thank you all for being here and also how you set it up. Everybody who set this up, Dean, and I'm forgetting everybody's name. This has really been helping me so much in my next steps and my thinking and it's just really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciated your mentioning of the very simple but powerful tools which are in the chat, mentioned in the chat. I believe it's called Capacitar for anyone who's interested in following that thread that Vanessa has offered. Is there anyone else who has a final word of sharing?
Deep gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Brennan.
I have to say I feel invigorated, and that's, you know, we're talking about terrible things, but when we put our face to the cold face of the conversation, it's enlivening, and I think that needs recognizing.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yes, I'm feeling a sense of connection, of a really lovely connection around the white world anyway right now, from what I can see in the pictures. But that's something. So the idea of our seeking together is really beautiful. Thank you for creating this space.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm sorry that I've gone over a couple of minutes here. It means something in my way of looking at meetings. And I am very willing to stay a couple of more moments. I'd love to hear any more comments that people would like to make along this track. And I completely understand if anyone wants to check out, needs to move on to the next thing in your day. Thank you all so much for your heart, for your sincere participation, and your patience with the technical glitches today. And I look forward to hopefully many more of these topics and conversations, perhaps hosted by you next time. Is there anyone who'd like to step in and share? Yeah, please, William.
Yes, I just want to give a quick shout out to Jay, target of opportunity here, and let him know that I am working diligently to process the ton of material that he gave us access to as a potential follow-up to your 6 weekends seminar, if you will. It's brilliant material. I've loved going through it. And of course, I had already commented to you that I thought that the conversation that you, Dean, hosted with Jay was, I had to go through like 5 times and take it really, really slow. So I just want to say how much I appreciate it to both of you for that offering.
Great. Thank you for mentioning that, William. And in a bit of shameless promotion here, I have a podcast. It's a YouTube channel called The Poetry of Predicament. And I would love it if you would take a visit there and possibly subscribe if you wish. And it's conversations with thought leaders about this very topic. And Jay Early is one of the people that I've recently spoken with. And Jay will be speaking with the group that that William was just mentioning, 6 Saturday sessions in 3 months webinar about deep adaptation in times of collapse. And this next Saturday is one of those sessions, and Jay will be talking with us about the kinds of groups and the kind of movement that he was talking about earlier, at least in the small group he was talking about that earlier. So any last share?
Hi, Dean. This is Laura.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you. I actually already facilitate some online groups and circles around this topic, as well as in-person workshops and retreats. And it's just really nice for me to have a place to just receive that support. I always participate in my own gatherings to a certain extent, but I'm sure, as you know, Dean, and others probably know also, you always have an eye on holding the container. So it's just really nice to be able to drop in and receive that support. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, everyone, thank you for staying a few extra minutes. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to our next chance to be together.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.